Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and I've got to say it's Thursday, and I'm delighted to be joined by John Paul Mason. Been a few weeks, JP. Great to have you back, my friend. Did you manage to get to the game last night? I'm not sure. We never had a chance to talk. You were there last night. You thawed out. Have you thawed out?
Sub-zero temperatures. It was a cold one, but do you know what? I really enjoyed it. I don't know what the general opinion seems to be from other people, but I thought the first half was really good. And I kind of forgot about the cold really until I was walking out the ground, and I was like, "Oh no, I'm very cold indeed." But yeah, no, it was good. It was a good win. Not flashy really, but it was one of those wins where it's a team that took points off us last month at Tannadice, and then there was all the chat about have other managers figured out how to play against Celtic, and well, if they did, then it didn't work last night.
The big thing about figuring out how to play against us, I think all they would do, JP, right, is they would look at that Dortmund game and they would understand that they don't have the same level of quality, but you would analyse that game and say, how did they manage to get at Celtic? And the simple answer, before you go right into the analytics, is the high press. Like every single time Celtic get the ball, be on them, like proverbial moths to a flame, if you like. Let certain people play with the ball because they are good at giving it away, i.e. the left-hand side at Ibrox. And, you know, these are the things that when you're looking at Carter Vickers and the fact that when he's got the ball, he's getting attacked because they didn't want him to have the ball because he can actually create something down that right-hand side. But on the left-hand side, it was completely different. These are obviously just basics. But in order to do it and do it well, you've got to have a level of quality. So you come up against a St Mirren side or last night against Dundee United. I actually don't think they're capable of doing that. So what they will do is something like the opposite, where they'll just really defend really, really deep, and they'll try and make Celtic play narrow. Because up until actually into the game, you know, our wingers for me were our biggest weapon. And then I find out that Kuhn has pulled up in the warm-up, which is a bit of a concern. I want to start off with it's not in a negative way, but I've got one eye on the Champions League at the end of the month. And I'm looking at that right-hand side, and it's my biggest concern, JP, because your third choice is Yang. He gets another game last night. Now, I'm not going to get into the whether or not it's a personal thing and all the rest of it. I'm just going to have a wee look at the Yang data, very raw data. As I say, I'm not getting right into the nuances of it. But when you look at what Yang has done at Celtic, right, last night was his 47th appearance. He has scored in that time from the wing. When you consider what Jota did, when you consider what Maeda's doing this season, Kuhn's doing this season, he has scored 1 goal in 47 appearances. He has got 4 assists. Now, he's played 1,833 minutes, so a goal or assist every 367 minutes. From a winger, not good enough. Absolutely not good enough. And that's my biggest concern, JP, because going into Young Boys, we can't strengthen for these games, these 2 games in January in the Champions League. So you might have to play what you're running with. And Yang is that guy if Kuhn and Forrest are not fit.
Yeah, last night I was willing him to do well. I said to the guys around about me, I was like, hopefully tonight is the night that we're talking about Yang for the right reasons at the end of the game. But unfortunately, despite all the goodwill in the world, it's safe to say that there's not going to be a song made up about Yang anytime soon.
We'll come back to the songs, and no one can complain about us talking about music the day, JP, after last night. Nobody.
Yeah, that's true. Very true. Yeah, he just he flatters to deceive. You know that he's a guy that can sort of look like he's about to do something and then it just doesn't happen. And his strength on the ball was exposed right in front of me last night in the second half when he was like on the north stand side. And there was a moment in the second half where he has the ball, has options, dilly-dallies, player goes in, sees the hesitation and just robs him off it and brushes him off the ball. There was no foul. It was just a kind of weak moment, you know. So there's probably a level for him somewhere, but it's not Celtic. Clearly, by the stats you've just read out, when you're looking at the stats, Kuhn's stats, apparently, I sometimes worry about reading things and then repeating them on here because you don't know if they're verbatim. Because somebody dug me up about the European record, the Davy Hay European record, and said that was not right or whatever. So I heard Pat Bonner say it on BBC Sports Sound, so serves me right for trusting Pat Bonner. But the Kuhn stats that were, I think it was Transfer Market. It was a tweet from Transfer Market that said that his stats right now are better than Jota's best season, like at the end of the season. So if you're turning in numbers like that, and we've paid a not far off a similar fee for Yang to Kuhn. It's not as if we paid 10 million for Kuhn and 500,000 for Yang. It was what, 3 and a bit million for Kuhn, and however much for Yang.
Yeah, 2 and a bit for Yang. I was looking at it this morning. It's a brilliant stat, that, because Jota is so well loved and revered amongst the Celtic support, and rightly so. But you look at that data. This season, 27 goals and assists in 27 games for Nicholas Kuhn going into last night. And you're replacing that with 1 goal in 47 games. And this is really my big concern. And I think last night, as you say, it was exposed because at one point we even put Luke McCowan out there to say, right, can Luke play out there? Because we really are struggling. I was reading just before we came on live here that there appears to be a deal done for not only Stephen Welsh, you might have heard that he's away to Mechelen on loan, but also for Lewis Palma. So the chat is Rio Vallecano on loan with an option to buy for 2.5. So these players, Brendan Rodgers, it doesn't take us to point this out. Brendan Rodgers is seeing these guys every day at training. The interesting thing, though, right, and this is why I brought it up, the interesting thing in relation to Yang, because those stats that I read out were really, for me, if anybody thought he did okay, and I got a lot of comments last night saying, Yang did all right last night. He didn't. He actually didn't. He never got a single cross into the box. 1 forward run into the box, JP. This is a winger. 1 forward run into the box. So when you look at that, so 47 appearances, 1 goal, 4 assists. You then look at Palma, and this is a frustration I have with him, right? So last night was his 50th appearance, although it was a cameo. So they've played roughly the same games, but he has played quite a bit more minutes than Yang, because remember he went through that phase of being a first pick. 2,506 minutes. Now, in 50 appearances, he has scored 12 goals and created 12 goals. And you look at his minutes per goals and assists, and it's still sitting at 104 minutes. Compared to Yang's 367 minutes. But interestingly, 0 from this season. So he's not scored and he's not created a goal this season. And actually, you'll find that most of the good numbers that you look at Palma were in the first 6 months of last season. So he's done nothing for a year. So he's out the door.
He can't be trusted, that's why.
Exactly. And by the way, this is not a reflection on last night. I just thought last night was professional. We were dominant. We completely controlled the game. There was a wee bit of nervousness at 1-0. Of course there was. JP, everybody would like to have a 2-goal cushion. But we came through it in the end. We were never really under any great deal of pressure. Schmeichel had a couple of decent saves. Carter Vickers, when required, he threw himself in front of balls. He blocked things.
Several back passes were applauded. That happened. Yeah. I made mental notes of, and also turning around and saying to the guys behind me, I was like, that was a back pass applauded there. Because... I think that whole thing's been completely... It's one of those ones where, well, you're on this way more than me, but like, there's been times where I've been talking and realised, wait a minute, there's a camera and a microphone on me here. I've gone down an alleyway here that I can't reverse out of. I think with Rodgers in that, particularly in the first one from the weekend, you could tell that he was just on one, and to put it in a pretty short way. It just seemed like there was something annoying him, and that's what he decided to come out with. I was glad that he took the last night's songs in good faith and good jest, or whatever you want to call it.
Give me your top 3, JP. What was your top 3 from last night?
And they got a song last night. It was the Kit Man. That's what he said. But Boric was definitely up there. I think the Boric song was great to hear. That was pretty loud. And by the way, I don't know if this has been mentioned before. You do realise that the boys and the Green Brigade are clearly coordinating what they're doing. I think there's some sort of hymn sheet that's passed around with minutes next to it, because they were in unison. I think they've had criticism over one corner singing one song and one corner singing another, but I think last night they were definitely, it was like that was a sort of calculated.
It was coordinated, wasn't it? It was
coordinated. What I was looking for, yeah. So
you're going for Boric.
Boric and Jan Vinegar of Hesselink. That was a good one as well.
Pulling out the retro ones here, by the way.
Yeah, well, it was interesting because Pierce, that sits behind me, I think he's about 18, maybe 19. So there was songs they were getting dished out last night that he didn't know. There was plenty that he did know, but there was quite a lot that he wouldn't have been about to remember them. And then it was kind of like pretty much a who's who of my Celtic support in life.
Brilliant. It was
brilliant. I mean, obviously you had Jimmy Johnston. I didn't see Jimmy Johnston, but apart from Jimmy Johnston, it was pretty much every player that they sang about was somebody that I've got pretty good memories of. And but yeah, Jan Vinegar, Hessling, Boric, and what else? There was a couple of Scott Sinclair. In fact, wait a minute, no, the Stuart Armstrong song, that's still up there in the best, I think, because got really fond memories of being in an underground in Brussels for the Anderlecht away game, our last Champions League away victory.
Yeah.
Not our only one, but it's definitely the last one, which was like 2017, I think it was. And,
I always remember that game, sorry to interrupt, in Cham, right? And watching him and thinking, has he ever played football? And then he plays a ball. He played a pass. Like, he could not find a Celtic player with a pass all night. And then he did. And obviously it was the pass.
There's a bit of similarity between Cham and Hatate, isn't there?
Wee bit when it comes to that, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. But we were just in this underground on the way to the game, and it was absolutely rammed. And every single Celtic fan was singing the Armstrong song and bouncing about, and the locals just walking by, like kind of bewildered at this, like such a joyous, kind of boisterous support, and the police as well, just kind of like looking on, being like, "Oh, these guys are all right. You know, we're not going to come into any bother here. I don't think so." But yeah, it was the right response, I think, to the, and actually, I think it helped the atmosphere as well. Whether you're singing about current players or ex-players, it's still singing, it's still creating an atmosphere.
Totally.
And it's just, I do, because the atmosphere's been a wee bit, it was weird at the weekend, and I take umbrage with Brendan Rodgers having a go at us for the back pass thing, because everybody was on edge that first 15, 20 minutes. And anything that happened in that game that wasn't positive was going to be kind of slightly scrutinised, because we were just off the back of a complete anomaly.
Absolutely.
Anomaly of a result that nobody saw coming. Certainly not me, sitting in a bar on the Falls Road in Belfast. It was just something that I did not expect. Don't think anybody expected it. None of them expected it, for sure. So there was a definite element of trepidation, I think, at the weekend. So it was good to kind of hopefully put that to bed last night with a bit of jovial retort. I would have liked it if they'd maybe done the Brendan Rodgers song as well, but then that does include an ambition of a certain amount of titles in a row, which you don't know if we're quite ready to be singing that.
Well, the thing is, with last night, we go into it, and I think there's like bigger discussion points that we've probably had a number of times on a Celtic State of Mind, JP, because when I looked at what is a Celtic state of mind, a big part of that was what makes up the typical Celtic fan. And I'm not saying this is all Celtic fans, but I think humour is a massive part of that. I mean, I don't know what it's like to travel on a supporters bus for another football team. So maybe I'm giving you a blueprint of what every football fan behaves. I don't know, right? But humour, I always felt, was at the forefront of supporting Celtic. I remember sitting in supporters buses and being often the youngest guy in there and listening to some of the the humour, the gallows humour that you would get from guys who'd worked in a pit all week and all this kind of stuff, JP, and just being a sponge to that, you know. And then I think that the singing element of the football is, like you said before, the atmosphere. And I've asked myself this so many times: what is ambience? What is atmosphere? It's energy. You walk into a stadium, it's the energy. It's like when you walk into a venue. And this is where the parallels between going to the football and going to a gig, I think, you know, go hand in hand. It's the energy that you feel when you're in there that's different from an empty room somewhere. You know, you walk into an empty room, where's the energy? But if you walk in there with everybody with a common goal and a common purpose, there is a positivity that is hard to describe. And what for me epitomizes that is song, Celtic and song. And from my earliest years, I've always spoke about my fondness for the Fields, Arth and Ride, coming home and asking the old fella about certain songs and all that. That Jimmy Johnson song, I think, is one of the most haunting, but in a good way, Celtic songs. Jimmy Johnson on the Wing. What a song that is. And so the humour and the music came together, I think, last night perfectly in response to whatever, you know, everything that's been happening. I think Celtic fans, I agree with you, we were absolutely within our rights to react the way that we did following that Rangers, not just the result, but the performance, you know, as much as anything. So to then turn around and say, you know, clap when we're playing it backwards, it's disrespectful to sing about Kieran Tierney. Like you say, it was a misstep. For me, it was a misstep. I'm not going to, you know, have a post-mortem about it. You know, I'm not going to send him to Siberia. He's still Brendan, but it was a misstep. And I think last night drew a line under it. The Celtic fans came out. They pitched it perfectly for me, JP. They really did. And then Brendan was asked about it, and he made a wee quip himself about the kit man. So I just thought, yeah, it's done.
I mean, it's not any time. I've not been that many times to see Manchester United. There was talk of some of us going down to the game next week. But Manchester United still sing songs about Cantona and you know, Scholes. There's a number of Man United players that still get sang about at Old Trafford, so it's hardly unusual. I get the Kieran Tierney thing obviously has a bit of a different barb to it, because there's obviously strong chat of him coming back. It seems to be almost inevitable now. I mean, Romano's tweeted about it, and Anthony Joseph's tweeted about it. It seems that
if Romano, Joseph, and McGowan, if you get the trio right, it's happening, eh?
I mean, I don't trust anything Keith Jackson says. So even if he has said it, I don't believe it. But Kieran Tierney coming back obviously is a bit of a unique moment, isn't it? It's and the ties that he has with the Green Brigade, he's actually probably pals with quite a lot of them, as in he would go and spend time with them at a supporters club or whatever, and he has done. And you saw the rapport he had with them when he was here before. So that, to me, when that was sang at the weekend, I just turned around to Pierce and Eddie behind me, and I was like, well, that means it's definitely happening. There's no way they'd be singing that, if, you know, right at the death of the game. And I think as well, it was the fact that it was at the death of the game. It wasn't during the game. It wasn't as if it was like going full pelt midway through the first half. I think it was right at the end of the game, as if to say, as if it was a kind of like he's on his way type thing. So we'll just wait with bated breath to see if we get him in this window or the next. But this Greg Taylor situation is really unfortunate for everyone concerned, because people are, as soon as you turn the spotlight on a player, it ramps up all the chat online about him and everything else, and people are so vociferous in their dislike of the guy, and you know, calling him Rangers fan from Ayrshire and all this. It's like, come on, man! Like, the guy's lifted how many trophies for us? He's laughed in Morelos's face and came up with a slogan that's on scarves and t-shirts that are on sale outside Celtic Park. You know, I mean, what more do you want the guy to give to the cause? Yes, he's not the best left back we've ever had. That's acceptable. Kyogo's not the best striker we've ever had.
Is he the best? Is he the best left back we've had since Tina left?
Yeah, absolutely.
By a distance.
We wouldn't have won the trophies that we won if we had an absolutely miserable, terrible left back that couldn't kick his own backside. It's as simple as that. The guy has contributed massively. He's not been on the periphery. He's not hid. He doesn't hide. And there's no way you can say he hides. I think he gives everything to the game. Whilst that sometimes does frustrate, and there's been moments where I've kind of been like, oh, come on, man. Like, we can do better than this. I still am glad that we've had him to be able to win the titles that we've had and the cups that we've won, because he's played a big part in that. And it's just that it's weird that we're at this crossroads where everybody kind of knows that Tierney is coming back, including him, clearly, and he's probably known for a lot longer than us. Mm-hmm. I mean, this has probably been in the post for a long, long time, hence the impasse with his contract. So the chat I heard from somebody last night was that he wants to be a top earner, and Celtic are probably not willing to meet him at that point. And then it comes down to, well, if he wants to move and there's a bigger offer elsewhere, what can you do? You can't hold him back.
Well, I mean, the thing is with this, JP, it's not just a case of being online sleuths in preparation for the Daily Bulletin. We do talk to people in the game, agents, for example, who have got some great insight into what's happening across European and world football at times. And what we have said on a Celtic State of Mind at various different points is as follows, and has started to filter into the kind of mainstream. And what we were saying is, the first thing was, the number one signing for Brendan Rodgers in the summer was Kieran Tierney. Summer passed. He then got injured. So he got injured playing for Scotland in a squad that Greg Taylor was part of. Greg Taylor knows that Celtic are interested in Kieran Tierney. Mm. The last time Greg Taylor was in a contract negotiation with Celtic, he wanted 18 grand a month. He got 12 grand a month. This time round, he wanted 25 grand a month. I don't know what the offer is. I can't say what we've offered him. I don't know how big a difference is it. It wouldn't surprise me if we're offering him the 18 that he wanted 4 years ago, right? But that is where we are, and that is the impasse. That is where there's a stumbling block. But what I've been saying over the last few weeks in relation to that is the ideal scenario, and the one that would make sure we've got a strong area at the left-hand side of the fence, make sure that the gaffer isn't as prickly as he was after the game, because I think it all added to his emotions. Mm-hmm. Give him his deal. Give him his deal, because when you look at the amount of money we have spent to try and replace Kieran Tierney, seriously.
Yeah, no, I know.
You know, what is it called? What we've spoken today about Palma. Palma was one of a number of wingers we brought in after the departure of Jota. We brought in Palma, we brought in Yang, and we brought in the seldom seen kid Marco Tilio. Remember him? None of the three of them were doing the business, so we brought in Kuhn. We brought in 4 wingers to replace one. And it was a wee bit like that with Tierney. Tierney leaves and we just kept buying left backs. Greg Taylor comes in, ball and goalie, like Salt, Bernabe. I mean, are we going to have another succession of left backs like that? Or should we just say, listen, it's 25 grand a week. We're moving some of the deadwood out. Sorry to call them deadwood, but they're not contributing. Give them the deal. Bring in Tierney. And the discussion we've been having is, right, so apparently, according to the report from Stephen McGowan, 35 grand a week's what Tierney's deal's going to be. 25 grand a week for Greg Taylor. Mm-hmm. Right. 60 grand a week. Right. Okay. If you were shelling out in one player, I get it. That's 2 players. Mm-hmm. It's 2 players. It's your first choice and your second choice. And both of them will play a lot of football, JP. Because Tierney's averaging 35 games a season throughout his career.
I didn't actually know that until last night. And my pal Robert, who gives me a lift to the games, he said that's what his average was. And I was like, really? I thought it would be way less than that.
Yeah.
But I guess sometimes players out of sight, out of mind. I mean, I'm trying to keep up with Matt O'Reilly's career at Brighton, and that's difficult enough to sort of keep your eye on another club when you're focusing on when it's been so frenetic with Celtic games. You know, sometimes you just want to not watch football for a couple of hours, because it's been quite relentless recently with the amount of games.
Yeah.
And it doesn't really stop, because I've got another one on Saturday, and then fortunately I've got a week off. Well, not a week off, but like a midweek off anyway next week. But yeah, I mean, I didn't realise Tierney had kept up that level of games. It was obviously just been unfortunate with injury that's laid him out for, you know, a decent amount of time in the time that he's been away. But I I guess the amount of games that are played in England as well are still significant. You know, and especially Arsenal, who would invariably go deep in competitions like us. You would expect them to play sort of 50, 60 games a season. So 35 games a season probably isn't actually that crazy to think about when you put it alongside Tierney. But there's one thing I don't like is this sort of constant. I think basically a situation dragging on. You just want a situation sorted one way or the other, because it takes away focus from the bigger picture, which is Celtic doing well, and fans being united. Because all Greg Taylor seems to do at the moment is divide opinion. If a contract's signed and it's put to bed, then the people that support him will be happy. The people that don't support him will hopefully be quiet. I mean, you're not going to still be piping up about Greg Taylor getting a new contract after it's signed. I mean, what use is that? Once Ralston signed that new deal in the summer, nobody was sort of kicking up fuss about the fact that Ralston had been given a new deal. After that, and then he obviously came in and contributed massively to Angie's side. So yeah, you just want situations like that put to bed, because it was like the Green Brigade standoff when they were out of the ground. You don't want that happening. You don't want, like, as Brendan Rodgers has repeatedly said, when everybody's on the same page at Celtic, we are far stronger. And the Greg Taylor contract situation is admittedly not a huge thing that's threatening to derail anything, but it's still a topic. We're talking about it just now. I'd rather be talking about positivity, future sidings, and all the rest of it. So
it was something of a wobble, and this is the thing. It was Brendan that coined the Holy Trinity phrase, and I actually think we're an unstoppable force. If the board, the management team, and players and the fans are all in unison, we're a very, very strong, formidable force. But talking about 35 games as an average in the modern game, Cameron Carter-Vickers has only ever played more than that twice in his entire career. Kieran Tierney has played more senior games of football at this stage, and he's 27, as is Greg Taylor, than Greg Taylor. They both made their debuts at 17, and Tierney's played more football than Greg Taylor. Now, whether or not that trajectory continues for the next 5 years is questionable. But I do think that is the ideal situation to be in. Give both players a deal, bring them both in, and we'll be stronger for it. There's a wee bit of movement already happening. Stephen Welsh has been confirmed as being a loan departure to Mechelen. He's a player that's been, getting interest from Belgian football. Toulouse were interested in him. Udinese, I think it was Udinese, interested in him. He's obviously a player, JP, at 24, who can be an asset for a football team. Otherwise, he wouldn't be pinging on the radars of clubs from all over Europe. But he came in against Dundee United, and Tanner, I thought he played really well. He played really well in that game, but he's never been able to get a starting berth and make it his own. And I think a move would be right for Stephen Welsh.
Well, when you've got two guys now at centre half that you've paid $6 million each for, there's not really a future where you see Stephen Welsh becoming a regular centre half at Celtic, which he kind of has to do at this age. So, obviously it'll be tough for him to leave. Of course it would be. He's clearly a Celtic fan. He's come through the academy, and you would always kind of harbour that hope that you would maybe become the sort of James Forrest of the defence or something like that, where you're here in 10 seasons time and you've played a hell of a lot of games for Celtic and won a lot of trophies, but I just don't see it. I just think it's Celtic's central defence is such a it's such a talkative point of contention with fans. It's like you can't have passenger. I mean, look at Liam Scales. Liam Scales still gets a hell of a lot of grief despite his contribution in the last couple of years, and that's just a fact. Is that you see it all the time.
He's on a short leash.
Yeah, you see praise for him as well, but I mean, I think there's I mean, look, straight away, there's a song for Carter Vickers and Trusty, American Boy. Have you heard it? There's a Green Brigade song.
A new ditty.
Yeah, it's Estelle, American Boy, and it.
Yeah.
So straight away they've got a song about them, and it's probably due to the fact that they're both, fairly highly rated, highly valued centre halves who are both good. They're the kind of level that you and I have spoke about for the last 4 years. Imagine we had a centre half pairing that were both kind of in the same. I'm not saying he's as good as Carter Vickers, Trusty, but he's obviously a good defender, an international, and all the rest of it. So that just makes it so hard for Stephen Welsh, because he's pushed right down. And at 24, 25, you're wanting to play week in, week out. And if that's in Belgium, then good luck to him.
Good luck indeed.
Can't play. You can't be on the periphery forever. I mean, you could, but it wouldn't. Surely it wouldn't be very enjoyable. I mean,
unless you're a goalie, the goalkeeper situation, there are goalkeepers out there who have made a career out of that, and they end up not playing many games in their senior career, but they've always got a contract for like 15, 20 seasons. Scott Bain, we're looking at you, kid. But if you're a centre half, as you say, you've got to play. And I do think Stephen Welsh will eventually be capped for Scotland. I mean, he was the under-21 captain, JP, but his development has hit a ceiling at Celtic. He's not going to get the game time. Absolutely not. It begs the question now then, when you look at that set up at the central defensive area, and you've got the American boys, and then you've got Scalesy. Well, the only other centre-half would have been Nawrocki. However, he's played 9 minutes of football this season, and we have brought Dane Murray back from Queen's Park. A very good, positive start to the season for Murray. Does he slot into the Stephen Welsh role for you as being like the fourth choice?
Well, I think that's what Brendan Rodgers alluded to in a press conference before Stephen Welsh left. That was the kind of one in, one out scenario. So, I don't really know a lot about Dane Murray. I know that he came in and played early on under that. Did he not play in the Champions League?
He played in Angie's first game against Midtjylland.
Yeah, he did.
Both games.
He must have been. What age would he have been at that
18,
point?
18, and he played well. That was near Beaton, remember, with the finger wagging and all that. And in comes Murray, and he was thrown in, really thrown in at the deep end, but he'd done really well when you look back on those two performances. But he's had two, like, what would have been career-threatening injuries, UCL injuries, and he's fought back from that. But I think he was so highly rated. Club showed a wee bit of faith in him when he came back from the second one, and I think it's now time to see what the boy can do at this level, JP, because you do want there to be players coming through the ranks. You do. And Murray, obviously, Stephen Welsh, if he had stayed and he was playing games, great. And he showed against Dundee United what he could do. But, he's 24. And it's just like the timing isn't right for Stephen Welsh to be that fourth choice. It is for Dane Murray. Coming back from Queen's Park, going out there, showing the right attitude and application. And obviously the scouting and the data's coming back to Celtic. And they're thinking, this boy could, when we re-register the squad, he could definitely be a part of that for the Champions League. I'm talking about the homegrown quota rather. So he'll step in for Welsh, won't he?
But he wouldn't be able to play. I mean, God forbid anything happened to any of our centre halves. He wouldn't be able to play against Young Boys Bern or Aston Villa because he's not been. Won't be registered in the squad.
That's a good point, though, because obviously one player who is registered in the squad is Stephen Welsh, and he has gone out on loan. Does that change anything? If someone knows in the comments, if you're able to, because I know there's an emergency procedure for goalkeepers, if you're able to register a player under these circumstances.
Well, this is the first time that we've ever had European football in January, as far as I know. When have we ever played European football in January? Because it's never been in January, has it? It's always been any European fixtures would start in February, because just because of the change in the format of the competition, that's what happens now. There's 2 games in January that you have to contend with, so that obviously would impact things like Palma leaving. So you obviously, if Palma has been allowed to leave and Welsh has been allowed to leave, then Brendan Rodgers obviously thinks that if you can't register a new player, like say we go out and sign Tierney, he won't be able to play in those European games. because he's not been here. But Brendan Rodgers obviously thinks that he can get by in those 2 games without Palmer and without Welsh.
Yeah, and he's probably right.
So, well, he is probably right, but I mean that makes me think that the Kuhn injury hopefully isn't that serious, because I mean you're leaving yourself quite short for options. James Forrest is out. Yang clearly isn't what we require, or isn't at the level that we require. So you're definitely short in that area. So it'll be interesting to see if there is now movement on the winger front as well, in terms of who we go after.
Yeah, without a doubt. And again, there's the question about, in terms of the investment, JP, how much investment will we have this January, depending on how the Champions League games go, because you're leaving yourself 1 or 2 days after the Villa game to get guys in.
Yeah.
With a view to registering them for the playoffs. Should we get there, of course. Comments coming in thick and fast. Liam Devine, with 1 year left on his contract now, Rodgers cannot expect to dictate long-term planning. With 2 years left, he got Ida, Engels and Trusty everything he wanted. With 1 year left, he has less leverage. That's an interesting point. At the halfway point, though, in terms of Ida, Trusty and Engels, where are we with those players? Engels has been the star man out of those 3. But these are the 3 big name, big money players that came in. The best signing of them has been Kasper Schmeichel. But those 3, how would you rate their first half season?
I think he does struggled a bit. You can tell that he's hungry and wants to get involved, and just things haven't come off for him in the last few games where he's got starts, which is frustrating, because you want your striker to get a goal, even just one, just to sort of feel like he's merited his start, so to speak. Because and I think again there's a lot of noise about Ida as well from the fan base. Some people seem to have amnesia about the earlier part of last year, where he came in and basically helped us win the league and the Scottish Cup. That seems to have been just brushed over. And I think maybe everybody just expected, because we paid the money for him, they just expected him to come in and be like hat trick, overhead kick, diving header. Like it doesn't work like that. I think some time has to be allowed. I think you judged Ida at the end of the season, probably, rather than halfway through, because he came in late, if you remember as well. Not that excuses everything, but he did come in later and didn't get the pre-season. And maybe there's an element as well of he's not really been suited to the style of play that we've been playing. It's all been kind of designed for Kyogo, but that doesn't give him an excuse. I think he still has to contribute. But I like the guy. I want him to do well, and I think a big goal in a big game is something that he needs. Maybe just to sort of get a few people off his back. And you don't want people just going, oh, it's all very well scoring when you're 3-4-0 up, because there's that's been channeled at a lot of players over the years at Celtic, where there's this thought that they only do something when we're home and hosed. So Ida needs a Scottish Cup final like goal to probably get his own confidence up as well. Because he's maybe just thinking at the moment, I am that guy that has been coming on late until recently. But his all-round play obviously can bring other people into the games as well. I mean, how do you could say that Ida's play has helped create space for Kuhn to get goals. Mm-hmm. There's that argument, and I'm sure people with a lot more football knowledge than me could analyse games and maybe point that out as fact. I don't know. Engels, a big price tag and a lot of pressure, as Callum McGregor said last night. I think his dad's picking him for man of the match. But he has stood out at Celtic Park, and that's why I was really disappointed that he wasn't in the starting lineup at Ibrox, because I'm not saying he would have made a difference to that performance, because everybody was off it in that game pretty much. But I was really looking forward to seeing him in that game, because I think he's maybe ready now to start in that type of game, because he didn't start in the cup final, did he? He didn't start. No, and I didn't think he was ready for that cup final, given the lead up to it. But with the lead up to the Ibrox game, I kind of felt he was in a better place. But he's slowly but surely starting to impose himself in the midfield, and you see his range of passing incredible. He's getting really frustrated with himself for not taking the shot on when he probably could. I saw him last night, like screaming at himself for, I think he just took one too many touches outside the box. There's a few times as well where he was like, you could shoot here, but he was laying it off, laying it off to other folk. But I think Ingles has been, he's maybe not been what we hoped and thought he would be in the first 6 months, but you know from previous that there's so much evidence to suggest that in the next 18 months we're going to see an £11 million player. And then Trusty as well, really happy with him. I thought in the cup final he did struggle a bit in the cup final in that first half. I can see why Rodgers brought him off. I don't know if it was pressure or what, but I mean, it was a pretty high intensity game.
Biggest game of his career, JP.
Yeah, biggest, exactly. He's not played, you know, bucket loads of cup finals and played in really high pressure games, to my knowledge anyway. I mean, what was it, Sheffield United? Is that where he was?
Yeah.
And it was an Arsenal academy graduate before that, I think. So, but Trusty's shown, I mean, he's winning over Pierce Eddie that sits behind me, and that's Eddie wasn't for him for a few games, and then I asked him at the weekend, I was like, are you team Trusty now? And he was like, I.
That's good to hear. But by the way, I mean, when you're looking at his previous record, he's never played a game as big as that. And not only that, you add in the added spice of it being a derby as well, JP. And we always go on about players being human. They're no robots. I speak about players freezing. Of course they do. They absolutely do. Sometimes on the big occasion. The one thing I like about Engels as well is his character. Always comes across really well, balanced when he's speaking, JP. But not only that, some challenges that he's had in terms of the coin thrown incident at Ibrox, or a couple of jambos trying to wind him up when he's taking a penalty, and he's come through that, and he's come through it pretty seamlessly. I think there might have been a few games where he wasn't great. I read a stat last week, believe it or not, mate, and I'm sorry. And if Matt O'Reilly's gran is tuning in today, I'm sorry to break this news, but Engels' goals and assists per minute was better this season than Matt O'Reilly's was last season, although Matt O'Reilly did it over a 9-month campaign, and this is only halfway through the season. So per minutes, he was 103, whereas Matt O'Reilly was 115. So he is contributing big time. A big part of that's obviously he's taking all the free kicks, all the corner kicks, and all the penalty kicks. So that is definitely helping him.
He can put in a corner, that's for sure. He's got some whip on his crosses. There's no doubt about that. So it's up to the people in the box to get on the end of them and to be in sync with them. But I mean, you look at that goal, the corner from Engels, knock on from Scales, and then Maeda's header. What game was that? Was that the St Mirren game? Can't remember.
St Mirren or St Johnstone?
St Johnstone, yeah. But that type of thing, you could see that's been worked on, and you need that quality of ball into the box to be able to do that.
No, without a doubt. And you know, what was interesting for me was when we signed Adam Ida, I was chatting to young James French, who's based over in Ireland, and you know, this is just my own naivety, I guess. I was talking about the fact, he's good in the air and he's going to score goals in the box, etc., with his head. And James said, actually, he's not that good in the air. And all these balls that you're talking about with Engels, playing them into the box time and time again, I think we're screaming out for the aforementioned Jan Vennegoor Hesselink type player, the Pierre Van Hooijdonk type player, who's just going to kiss Sutton, John Hartson, who's just going to attack these balls. Can you imagine a striker like that? I mean, they're going to get on the end of them. Last night, I felt that there was a few balls going in. I'm like, where are they going? They're good enough. The distribution's good enough, but nobody's attacking them, and that was a wee bit of a frustration. But I'm going to go back to James. Hopefully, he can come back on and give us his kind of half-term report card on those three players. Loads more to discuss, obviously, incomings, outgoings, and today JP, as I did yesterday, is the birthday of an ex-Celt who is 37 years old today, right? Now, yesterday, the ex-Celt who was 34 was Stefan Johansson. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to read you a list of his clubs from most recent backwards. And you tell me when you get who it is. It's not easy. It is not easy.
Oh, so today, to the 37-year-old?
37-year-old, yeah. I'm not telling you it is, obviously. Almost slipped out there. But this is a player who is currently retired. So he doesn't have a club. He's 37 years of age. And this is his record of teams. His last team were Mexican, Tampico Madero. Any idea who that might be? Tampico Madero. He played for
Juarez?
No.
He'd be older than that, surely. Juarez will be older than 37.
Will it be? Yeah, roughly there or thereabouts. Prior to Tampico Madero, he played with Tenerife, although that was on loan. So he was playing in Spain. Before that, another Mexican club, Cruz Azul. Prior to that, UDG, Santos Laguna. Any ideas? Before that, he played for Volga, a Russian team, and that's who Celtic sold him to. So he went from Celtic to Volga. All right. Prior to that, he was registered with Barcelona. He had a loan deal at Lyon. Any idea?
Crosas.
Mark Crosas. There you go. What a career he had after Celtic. So he's played
37.
37. Yeah.
Wow.
He's got a big Joe Ledley beard. It's an absolute
Celtic as well. There's not a CSC called Bishop Crosas CSC.
Yes, I've seen him on Twitter. No, so there you go. Today's birthday boy, 37 years of age, and it is Mark Crosas. We've been talking a wee bit about music, and nobody has complained in the comments. I'm a massive GT fan, says Chill Pill, but 25k is too much. Is it? Is it? Because when you're looking at Celtic at the moment, maybe this is the frustration, JP. Maybe Brendan Rodgers is looking at this and gone, right, who is the top earning players at Celtic? Is it the player who gets picked every week? Is it the player who's played around 200 games in 6 seasons? Probably, aye. He's kind of proven himself to be a first-team regular, an important cog in the wheel. He wants to stay here, a cog in the machine, rather. He wants to stay here.
He does. Is that been kind of widely accepted that he does want to stay?
Let's go back to that interview you did with him. That impromptu chat you had with him on the last day of the season, last season, remember?
Yeah, Jamie did ask him if there was any news on the contract, and he said no.
No, that was back then.
Yeah,
that was back then. So he wants to do a deal, but his reckoning is that he's worth 25k. I think it's easy for us to say, it's too much. Maybe it shouldn't be too much. Maybe we should shrink the squad, move on Janarowski and all these guys. Tillio's still a Celtic player. Kwon is a Celtic player. Lagerbielke. Get rid of a lot of them. And then,
absolutely. The amount of money that we've squandered on people that haven't contributed. So I certainly wouldn't be getting up in arms about Greg Taylor getting 25 grand a week. if when you compare it to some of the absolute waste of money and time that we've put into James McCarthy. Not much money did we pay James McCarthy? Talking about that last night, how there was never even an announcement that. There was never even an announcement. So, what happened there? That is a massive conundrum that's still on.
Quietly paid off. The contract. What happens when you've got a year, let's say, left on your contract? Because he would have still had 1 year left on his contract. Do you get 50% to walk away? I think you maybe get your wages 50% of them.
I just find it sad because obviously the guy was a Celtic fan. You remember his interview when he signed? He was a Celtic fan, and then he barely kicked a ball for us in 3 years.
Do you think he would come onto this as Acsom to talk about it?
He's probably signed an NDA.
Possibly.
I don't know. Well, he's not been in the press, has he? There's been nothing. You've not heard anything from him at all.
He probably doesn't want to badmouth the team he supports.
No, I get that. I wouldn't do that either. But if anybody, like the last commenter, was getting up in arms about Greg Taylor if you're actually starting to forensically analyse who gets what and who's got what, then present him with a dossier of who's got X and Y in the last 4 or 5 years and be like, well, this guy who kicked about 3 balls for us in 3 years got this eye-watering sum of money. Greg Taylor's actually, all these trophies that we've managed to overtake this other club in terms of the trophy haul, he's contributed to that rise in the last 5-6 years. What's those other guys that have earned all this money done? So I think you have to be sensible about it. And if Greg Taylor does want to stay, that was a question mark over whether or not, because you see reports saying, oh, he's asked to be allowed to speak to Dynamo Zagreb and everything else. Like, surely you wouldn't want to go and play for Dynamo Zagreb. I mean,
that was a bit kind of like left field, that interest. And we were talking about the Kyogo interest in a wee second as well, but the Dynamo Zagreb one, were they aware of them before we played them? The source was very good. Apparently, it was all checked out. The source came very, very highly rated, incredible. So he will have options, and I've also heard that he's got options in the MLS, but we'll come back to them in a wee second. Another wee interesting point that comes out of Anthony McShane's comment: if Scotland can incorporate Tierney and Robertson in the same team, Celtic can do the same with Tierney and Taylor. That's another point. If Tierney comes in, he's another player who can play left side central defence. So,
he's also Scottish as well, which surely this homegrown quota thing will bite us in the proverbial at some point, because if we were to lose Greg Taylor, that's one gone, isn't it? Absolutely. Fair enough, you get one in with Tierney, but Welsh gone, that's another one gone. So that has to be looked at, and surely that is being looked at by Paul Tisdale, is that his name? Not really heard much from him.
Well, this is a big thing. We mentioned it yesterday, JP, right? January, normally your whole focus is on transfers, in and outs, and you're looking every single day, and you're getting 3 or 4 new names dropping into the maybe he'll sign columns. We've been focusing on the press conference, on the Rangers defeat, and on the singing last night. We've not really got into delved into the speculation and the gossip. But one thing that did interest me was the Kyogo story that broke this morning. Again, going back to what we knew about Tierney and Taylor, what did we know about Kyogo? Well, in June, I spoke about the fact, and I shared it privately, that Kyogo was going to change agency in August and expect some interest. Celtic would, at that stage, have accepted £18 million. And that was the scenario that we faced in June this year. Obviously, the change of agency happened, and instantly the Man City link occurred. Remember that? And I kind of called. I thought, I'm not sure that that's real. I think what's happened there is they're linking him to Man City to try and get a wee bit of interest in the player. They're actually trying to drum up interest in Kyogo. On the backdrop of Kyogo not being as prolific under Brendan Rodgers as he has been under Ange Postecoglou. And of course, he's lost his first team berth at the moment for the last 2 games, or is that just rotation? And then that story dropped this morning, but it came from the official MLS website that Kyogo had signed for Atlanta United. The registration had been obtained, and then when you clicked on the link, it was a broken link. So a bit of confusion around it, JP, but it doesn't bode well, because you think to yourself, right, if that's the official SFA website, let's say, you're going to check your source before you print a story, surely.
You would think so, yeah. How long have I got to go here? 7 minutes. Just got a low battery warning. just checking in on that. The Kyogo thing, apparently they've signed another Japanese striker. Did you know that?
So it was an error.
But it's quite a monumental error, is it not?
Yeah.
To you know what I mean? Like, how do you get that mixed up? That it seems very odd. And I think it was not Tam Selleck's son, the absolute genius,
the legendary figure.
Yeah, did you see his Now That's What I Call Music last night? That's pretty good.
I know. I would buy the CD. I'd buy
it. But it was the original Tam Selleck on Twitter said Kyogo to Atlanta United is a done deal, and that was yesterday that he tweeted that. And I don't really know who that guy is. Obviously, he's got a fake name and a fake picture. But when I saw that yesterday, I was like, oh, I'm sure he's tweeted stuff before that's been there or thereabouts. So maybe there is more to this than meets the eye. But to make a mistake like that seems, I mean, talk about amateur hour. To put up that, it's weird as well that it's like it wasn't any other club. It wasn't another M. It wasn't Charlotte or Kansas City or New York Red Bull, whatever the Red Bull New York team is. It wasn't. It was the team that he's been constantly linked with for the last few weeks. So I don't know. It's a bit of a strange one.
It's unusual. Yeah, it created a bit of confusion. I mean, even if you or I were putting something out on our own social media pages, JP, you would make sure that it was accurate. An opinion's an opinion, but something like that, you need to make sure that it was accurate.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, imagine you put out something that you were stating as fact, you'd get lanced.
And I would never forget about it. It would continually be brought back up. Now, with regards to the other thing I wanted to discuss very, very briefly, just because I think it's important that the propaganda machine that Liam Carrigan and I spoke about last week is challenged when necessary. The narrative is challenged when necessary. So last week we were talking about the fact that, you watch, worldwide audience watches the Derby game at Ibrox, and it's 90 minutes of a songbook that should have been banished to the history in the depths of time many, many moons ago. Sectarian bile fest for 90 minutes. Not a peep in the press. Not a peep. Nobody mentions it. That's fine. Celtic fans sing a song about Kieran Tierney, and it dominates the press for a week, right?
By the way, as a point made very well by a couple of mates I bumped into outside the ground before the game last night. They said Rodgers is clever, isn't he? He's taking all by that presser. He's taking the focus off the defeat at Ibrox to everybody talking about Tierney and Taylor, and I'm like, sure, that there's no way he's that calculated. He's a crafty guy, but there's no way that was his intentions with that. But
yeah, masterclass. I'm looking forward to the AI image of that one.
Yeah, what you're saying. I wasn't really paying attention to the songbook at Ibrox. I was too busy ordering another pint of Guinness in the Beehive.
Yeah.
But yeah.
The thing with that, JP, because I'm going to link it to last night. So the thing with that is, as soon as the minute's silence was observed, just have a look if you can bear to watch the game back at the first song the Rangers fans sing. Right. So, it's completely inappropriate. But that is the narrative. And I think sometimes it's important for people like yourself and I on this platform to challenge the narrative. Well, the narrative that's now been set, and not even challenged, was Clermont talking about Celtic with the 30 million quid. As if we're lucky, as if we're spending somebody else's money, as if we've got a cheat code to this game called Scottish football. JP, every penny was earned and tax was paid on every penny earned. Celtic can go and spend money that they earn. Celtic have got a strategy that allows us to bring in a player for MK Dons for 1.5, sell him for £25 million plus add-ons, and then spend the profit. We've got a strategy, JP. So when you're sitting in a press room, and I'm not a journalist, but is none of them got any kahunas? Is none of them going to say, well, actually, you're miles off with that? Well, why not look within? Why not look within?
James McFadden did when he said after, I think, whatever game it was, they dropped points in. There was a couple. It was either St Mirren or Motherwell. And he was kind of like, well, you can't play that card. Well, why did you not just beat Motherwell then? You're miles ahead of them in resources and everything else. So, and I don't recall the sacred Stephen Gerrard ever coming out with any part to do with finances or anything like that. And it was the exact same situation back then. We were still in the same ballpark in terms of what we could pay in transfers back then. I mean, bought Edward for 9 million back then. He wasn't bleating about us signing Edward. Anyway, they've got a £50 million player in Hamza Egaman. So, I mean, what are they worried about?
Of course they do. I'm looking forward to seeing the headlines. Tony Cassidy, yes, if JP or I could hold a tune, we would serenade you off into the distance with that as an outro. And Jungle Lion suggests that we should loan McEwen back to Dundee for the day. That would be funny, wouldn't it, if Dundee got something from tonight's game? Brian Murphy, we could find a fullback that would take 15k a week. We did, Brian. His name is Alexandro Bernabe.
See if you're starting to split hairs on like 10 grand here and 5 grand here and everything else. You've got a guy in the building who know what he can give you. Exactly. There you go. That's a pretty good point. And did you see, just before we finished, did you hear about the Irish boy that we've been linked with?
No.
We've been linked with a guy, and
tell me it's not John Joe Kenny.
No. He's a young, I think he might be a striker, but his name's Mason Melia. So if that comes off and we finally got a player called Mason, that's going in the back of my top. I mean, I just hope he goes with his first name rather than his surname, and then I would have a justified reason to have Mason in the back of a Celtic strip, because I've been cursed with that surname for my entire life as a supporter. So.
Well, we could do it. We could do an interview Mason on Mason. I always thought that when we were being linked to Lyndon Dykes that we could get Lyndon into this as Acsom, but thankfully we never signed him.
Well, Paul Mason from Aberdeen, if you remember.
Oh, yeah. Remember the cup final against Rangers? Absolutely, yes. But what I'm doing after this, JP, I'm jumping in the motor and I'm coming through to Glasgow to record this week's episode of This is Acsom. And I will be interviewing Mark McMaster, who wrote a brilliant Celtic song, a tremendous Celtic song. I'm always keeping my eye out for the next Celtic song. I think there's a modern Celtic songbook. You know, you hear some of the tunes that come out from the likes of Kevin Miles, Celtic My Heart and My Soul, loved that. Obviously, we worked with Paul Sheridan at the Wakes, Carly Connor to bring out The Glory and the Dream. So I'll be talking to Mark McMaster this afternoon, and that'll be out on Friday. Really looking forward to it. If anybody hasn't heard it, then I'm going to ask if it's okay for us to drop the video into our interview as well. Listen, as always, an absolute pleasure to talk to you for an hour on our favourite subject. And we were even allowed to talk about music and nobody moaned. There we go. It wasn't disrespectful to anyone talking about music. There we are. And hopefully you can join us again next week as well, JP. Thanks, everybody. 2,000 strong. Still 2,000. 2003. That was a good year in Europe. 2003. Watching us live. Thanks, everybody, for your support as always. And join us again tomorrow at 12:30 on A Celtic State of Mind.
Cheers, Paul.